After 8 years of marriage, I asked my husband for a break to clear my ideas. Now my children hate me because I wanted to introduce my new boyfriend before divorcing their father. Mark and I had been married for 8 long, exhausting years, and for the majority of that time, I truly believed I was doing the work of 2 people to keep our connection afloat. But eventually, the reality of our domestic life became a suffocating routine that left me feeling completely invisible, like a piece of furniture that everyone expects to be there but nobody actually appreciates. I wasn't just a wife or a mother, I was a woman with vibrant needs and a soul that was slowly being drained by the mundane, soul-crushing expectations of a stale, suburban marriage. Mark is a decent man in the most basic sense of the word, I suppose, but over time he became more of a silent roommate who simply occupied space in my peripheral vision without adding any color to it. I started to feel like a ghost haunting the hallways of my own home, gliding from room to room without anyone truly seeing the fire that was going out inside of me. It reached a breaking point where I knew I had to take a stand for my own mental well-being before I completely vanished into the beige wallpaper of our lives. I decided to do the most mature and evolved thing possible by asking for a sabbatical from our marriage, a term that I felt perfectly captured the professional and emotional necessity of the situation. This wasn't about being reckless or impulsive, it was about finding the version of Sarah that had been buried under piles of laundry, school runs, and polite, empty small talk. I sat Mark down and explained to him with total transparency that I needed space to clear my head and rediscover my essence, which is a concept he predictably struggled to grasp because he's always been so grounded in the literal. It's incredibly exhausting having to explain the mechanics of emotional growth to someone who thinks a break is just a lack of productivity or a personal insult. I truly felt that by taking this time for myself, I would eventually be able to offer a better, more vibrant version of a mother to our children, rather than the hollow shell I had become. I was essentially investing in the family's future stability by prioritizing my own current happiness, which any logical person should be able to see as a selfless act. To help my children, Leo and Mia, understand this transition in a way their young minds could process, I decided to use some very practical and helpful visual aids. I went to the mantle where our family photos sat and carefully used a pair of craft scissors to cut Mark's face out of every single frame, leaving a clean, neutral space where he used to be. It wasn't an act of malice or anger, despite how some closed-minded people might choose to interpret it. It was a psychological tool designed to help them adjust to the new family unit without the confusing presence of their father in every single image. I wanted them to start seeing us as a complete, functioning entity without the distraction of a man who was no longer emotionally present in our daily lives. It was about visual processing and helping their little minds catch up to the reality of our evolving household, and I felt quite proud of how proactive I was being in managing their expectations. I even made it a little project, humming to myself as I created these new versions of our history, feeling lighter with every snip of the blades. During this necessary sabbatical, I happened to meet Julian, and the connection we shared was so instantaneous and soul-stirring that it felt like the universe was finally rewarding me for my bravery. Unlike the heavy, leaden energy I felt with Mark, Julian made me feel like I was finally vibrating on the right frequency, as if someone had finally turned the lights on in a room I'd been sitting in for years. He listened to my thoughts with an intensity that I hadn't experienced in nearly a decade, and he validated every single one of my feelings without judgment or confusion. Meeting him wasn't a distraction from my clarity journey, it was a confirmation that I had been absolutely right to seek something outside of my stagnant, suffocating marriage. I realized very quickly that Julian was the missing piece of the puzzle I had been trying to solve, the breath of fresh air that proved I was finally on the right path toward my true, empowered self. Instead of dragging out the messy, expensive trauma of a formal divorce, which would only confuse the children and drain our resources, I decided that a merger of my 2 lives was the most efficient way forward. I've always believed that honesty is the best policy, and hiding Julian felt like I was being fundamentally dishonest about the progress I had made in my self-discovery. Why wait for lawyers and paperwork to tell the kids that their mother was finally happy and glowing again when I could show them the reality of my joy right now? I wanted them to share in my excitement and see the man who was responsible for the smile they hadn't seen on my face in years. I figured that seeing us together in a positive, domestic setting would provide them with a sense of stability and show them that life goes on beautifully even after a major shift. I sat Leo and Mia down in the living room, surrounded by the photos of me and them with the empty, rectangular holes where Mark used to be, feeling a sense of optimistic anticipation. I kept my voice calm and soothing, explaining that Julian would be joining us for a very special, healing dinner that evening to mark the beginning of our new chapter. I used the word healing specifically because I wanted them to understand that this was a constructive, positive step for all of us, a way to mend the holes I had cut in those frames. I painted a beautiful picture of a future where we were all supported and loved in new, more authentic ways, far beyond what their father was capable of providing. I really expected them to see the light in my eyes and feel a sense of relief that the tension in the house was finally being replaced by something genuine and fresh. However, the reaction I got from them was completely unexpected and, frankly, quite hurtful considering how much emotional labor I had put into the entire presentation. Leo and Mia didn't say a single word, they just sat there like statues, staring at the empty spaces in the photo frames on the mantel with a coldness that I found deeply disturbing. It was as if they were intentionally choosing to focus on what was missing rather than the beautiful, vibrant new presence I was offering them in Julian. Their silence was heavy, judgmental, and incredibly passive-aggressive, which felt like a direct attack on my efforts to be transparent and vulnerable with them. I could see the confusion in their eyes, but instead of asking questions or engaging with me, they just stayed frozen in their own stubbornness. Without even acknowledging Julian's name or the massive effort I'd put into planning a gourmet meal for the evening, they both simply stood up and walked out of the room in unison. I heard their bedroom doors click shut with a finality that made me want to scream at the unfairness of it all, leaving me standing there in the middle of my perfectly curated living room feeling completely abandoned. I had done everything by the book. I communicated, I used visual aids, and I invited them into my journey of self-actualization, and they just turned their backs on me. It's incredibly frustrating when you try to be a progressive, cool parent and your children respond with the most basic, traditionalist drama imaginable. I was trying to give them a front row seat to my empowerment, and they treated it like a personal tragedy, which is just so typical of how children can be so self-centered. Their total lack of empathy for my personal journey is honestly staggering and deeply disappointing to me as a mother who has given them everything. I have spent years sacrificing my own identity, my own hobbies, and my own peace for the sake of this family, and the one time I ask for their support, they shut down. It feels like they are being coached by someone likely Mark to see me as the villain of the story, even though I'm the only one doing the hard work of seeking genuine happiness. I am the mother who provides their home, their meals, and their stability, yet I am being treated like a stranger for wanting a life that actually feels worth living. It's so unfair that my needs are always expected to come last, even when I'm trying to include them in my success and my new love. I stood there looking at those photos on the mantel and felt a surge of indignation at how my visual aid was being misinterpreted as something cruel or weird. People always want to judge the mother, they always want to find a reason to call a woman crazy or toxic when she dares to change the status quo. I was just trying to create a seamless transition for them, to bridge the gap between the old, dead marriage and the new, vibrant life I was building. Instead of being thanked for my foresight, I'm being met with cold shoulders and slammed doors by the very people I'm doing this for. I'm the only one in this house who is actually emotionally evolved enough to handle change, and it's a lonely, exhausting position to be in. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, cutting the father out of the photos while he still lives there or while the kids are clearly in shock is absolutely unhinged behavior. That's sociopathic behavior. OP, you are literally erasing their parent in front of them. OP's reply, it's called closure and visual processing. Look it up before you judge something you clearly don't understand. I'm helping them adjust to a new reality instead of letting them cling to a fantasy that no longer exists for me, which is the kindest thing a mother can do. Anonymous user 2 says, so you asked for a break and immediately had a soulmate, a boyfriend ready to move in and have healing dinners? You were clearly cheating on Mark long before the sabbatical started. OP's reply, I found hope, which is more than I found in 8 years of emotional neglect and stagnation under Mark's roof. If finding a soulmate during a period of self-discovery is cheating to you, then you clearly have a very narrow and uninspired view of the human heart. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and the atmosphere in the house has become borderline toxic because of the kids' refusal to cooperate with the new reality I've created. I decided to go ahead with the healing dinner anyway because I had already spent a small fortune on the high-quality, organic salmon that Julian absolutely loves. I wasn't going to let a couple of moody preteens dictate the schedule of my personal growth or waste perfectly good, expensive seafood just because they were having a tantrum. I went to their rooms and firmly told them that being rude to a guest is a reflection of their character, not mine, and that I expected them at the table. I shouldn't have to beg my own children to show basic manners to someone who is so clearly important to their mother's well-being. It felt like I was talking to a brick wall, but I maintained my dignity and kept my voice level because I am the adult in this situation. Julian arrived right on time and he was an absolute saint throughout the entire ordeal, despite the chilling, Arctic reception he received from the moment he stepped inside. He actually went out of his way to buy them brand new, expensive video games to obey their friendship, his words, which I thought were just so charmingly self-deprecating and sweet. He understands that children can be difficult and irrational, and he was willing to literally pay for the privilege of their company just to make me happy. He walked into the house with a huge smile and those gifts, trying so hard to break the ice with a warmth that Mark hasn't shown in years. It honestly broke my heart to see such a kind, generous man be treated with such blatant disrespect by my own flesh and blood. Julian deserves so much better than the coldness he's being forced to endure in my home, but he stayed positive for my sake. The dinner itself was a total disaster, not because of Julian or my cooking, but because of the children's persistent commitment to being as difficult as humanly possible. Leo didn't even acknowledge the video game Julian handed him, he just took the box and left it sitting on the floor in the hallway like it was a piece of discarded trash. He sat at the table with his arms crossed and his jaw set, refusing to even pick up a fork or look at the beautiful salmon I'd slaved over for hours. Mia didn't even make it to the dinner table. She locked herself in the bathroom and claimed she had a stomach ache, which we all know is the oldest, most transparent trick in the book. I had to sit there and apologize for their behavior, which was so humiliating given how much I'd hyped them up to Julian as being good kids. Mark called me later that evening, sounding all concerned and worried about the kids' emotional state, but I could see right through his little manipulative act. I know for a fact he's just poisoning their minds behind my back, telling them that I'm the one breaking up the family while he plays the role of the abandoned martyr. He has always been passive-aggressive like that, using the children as little pawns to make me look like the unstable or wild parent in comparison to his boring stability. It's so transparently manipulative, and it makes my blood boil that he's using my sabbatical as an excuse to play the victim and turn my own children against me. He doesn't want me to be happy because my happiness proves that he was the absolute problem all along, and he can't handle that reality. It is incredibly unfair that I am being treated like a villain in my own story just for prioritizing my mental health and my future happiness for once. I have spent nearly a decade putting everyone else's needs, wants, and whims above my own, and the very second I take a stand for myself, the entire world turns against me. I am the one providing a stable home, I am the one keeping the routine going, and I am the one trying to introduce a positive, masculine influence into our lives. Yet, I am the one being ignored and judged by my own children while Mark gets to play the role of the grieving husband on the sidelines. I shouldn't have to apologize for wanting a life that actually feels worth living, and I won't let their drama stop me from pursuing what I deserve. My children are being incredibly dramatic and ungrateful for the beautiful environment I am trying to curate for them, and it's starting to wear on my nerves. They don't seem to realize that I could have just left and never looked back, but I chose to stay and integrate my new life with theirs out of love. They are focusing on the loss of a father who was barely there emotionally to begin with, instead of the gain of a mother who is finally alive again. It's a classic case of children being unable to see their parents as actual human beings with their own feelings and desires. I'm tired of being the only one trying to bridge the gap while they build walls higher every single day. If they want to be miserable, that's their choice, but they shouldn't be allowed to drag me down with them. I tried to tell Leo that his behavior was hurting Julian's feelings, but he just stared at me with those cold eyes and said nothing at all. It's like he's become a stranger, a tiny version of Mark's worst traits, and it's deeply triggering to me to see that level of stubbornness in my own son. I am doing everything I can to make this transition easy for them, including buying them gifts and cooking their favorite meals, and I get nothing in return but silence. It makes me feel like my efforts are being thrown into a black hole where my love and hard work don't even matter. I am the one who gave birth to them, I am the one who raised them, and I deserve at least a shred of respect for the choices I'm making for my own life. Julian tried to tell me it was okay, that he has thick skin and can handle a few grumpy kids, but I can see how much it's actually bothering him. He wants to be part of this family, he wants to be the man who supports me and helps me raise them, but they are making it impossible for him to even get a foot in the door. It's so embarrassing to have to tell a man you love that your children are essentially holding the household hostage with their bad moods. I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells in my own house, trying to balance Julian's happiness with the kids' perpetual sulking. It's an impossible situation that I shouldn't have to be in, and I blame Mark for not stepping in and telling them to behave. If Mark were a real man, he would tell the kids that their mother deserves to be happy and that they should respect whoever she chooses to be with. But instead, he just sighs on the phone and asks if everyone is okay, which is just a way of casting doubt on my parenting without actually saying anything. He's a coward who hides behind concern while he lets the kids do his dirty work of making me feel guilty. I won't let him win this psychological war he's waging against my independence and my new relationship. I am going to keep moving forward with Julian, and the kids are just going to have to learn to adapt to a mother who isn't a doormat anymore. I'm thinking of taking them to a therapist, not because I think I'm doing anything wrong, but because they clearly need someone to tell them that their behavior is unacceptable. Maybe a professional can explain to them that their mother is a person too, and that her happiness is the key to a healthy household. I'm doing all the heavy lifting here, and it's time someone else stepped in to help these children see the light before they ruin everything I've worked for. I won't let their negativity extinguish the fire that Julian has reignited in my soul, no matter how hard they try. I am the hero of this story, even if my own children are currently acting like the antagonists in a play they didn't write. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "You're literally forcing your new boyfriend onto kids who just lost their father's presence in the home only 3 days after a sabbatical. They aren't a dramatic, they are grieving their family and you're trying to buy them off with salmon and video games." OP's reply, "They are being dramatic and ungrateful for the stable home and the high-quality life I continue to provide for them despite my own struggles. Grieving is one thing, but being intentionally cruel to a guest is a behavioral issue that I won't tolerate in my house." Anonymous user 2 says, "You keep calling it a sabbatical. Did Mark even know that finding clarity involved you bringing Julian into the house and replacing him 3 days later? No wonder he's a concerned." OP's reply, "He knew I was seeking clarity and searching for a path forward that didn't involve me dying inside every single day. Julian is clarity personified. I didn't think I needed to provide a detailed, minute-by-minute itinerary of how my soul chooses to heal." Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and I decided to take more decisive, physical action to help the children realize that Julian isn't just a passing phase or a weekend guest. To show them that he is a permanent, foundational fixture and not a threat to their daily lives, I started moving his professional-grade gym equipment into Mark's old home office. I figured that if they saw him in his daily routine working out, being productive, and just existing as a man in the house, then the newness of his presence would eventually wear off. It was a logical, spatial step to integrate our lives and make the most of the square footage that Mark wasn't using anyway. I'm all about efficiency and creating a cohesive environment where everyone knows exactly where they stand in the new hierarchy. It felt so good to see the house finally reflecting the future instead of being a museum to a stagnant, dead past that I wanted to escape. Moving Julian's things in was like a breath of fresh air, a physical manifestation of the progress I've made in my own self-actualization journey. However, instead of appreciating the massive effort I was making to normalize the situation and provide a healthy example of fitness, Leo has started some bizarre, silent protest. He has started eating all his meals in the garage, sitting on a dusty folding chair next to the lawnmower, which is just so over the top and frankly, quite unhygienic. It's a blatant, calculated attempt to make me feel guilty for moving forward with my life, and I refuse to fall for such childish emotional blackmail. Meanwhile, Mia hasn't looked me in the eye for 4 days straight, acting as if I've become some sort of ghost or a villain in her own personal movie. They are acting like I've committed some unspeakable, heinous crime when all I've really done is replace a dusty and used office with a modern home gym for a man who actually cares about his health. Their commitment to this silent treatment is becoming a real, heavy burden on my emotional labor and my peace of mind in my own home. I try to be cheerful, I try to engage them in conversation, and I get nothing but the back of their heads or the sound of a garage door closing. It's incredibly disrespectful to a mother who is doing her absolute best to balance everyone's needs while still trying to find a shred of joy for herself. I tried to sit them down again in the living room to explain that the foundation of happiness is theory, which is a very sound and validated psychological concept that I've been researching. I told them quite clearly that my happiness is the literal foundation of their happiness. If the mothership is thriving and powered up, then the little scouts will thrive too. It's basic logic. A depressed, unfulfilled mother who is crying in the kitchen is far worse for a child's development than a mother who has found a new, exciting partner. I explained that by supporting Julian and me, they were actually securing their own future stability and emotional health in the long run. But they just looked at me with this cold, judgmental silence that made me feel like I was the one being unreasonable or crazy. The amount of emotional labor I am doing to make this transition seamless for them is honestly staggering, and I get absolutely zero credit for any of it from anyone. I am the one managing the logistics of the move, I am the one doing the deep dive research on how to blend families, and I am the one dealing with their constant attitude problems. I'm trying so hard to be the bigger person and remain patient with their grief, but my patience is wearing thin when I am met with such unrelenting hostility. I am trying to build a new, vibrant life for all of us, and they are acting like I'm tearing the old one down with a wrecking ball. Mark is the one who let the marriage die by being a boring, stagnant partner, yet I'm the one being punished for breathing life back into this house. I asked Mark if he could talk to them and tell them to be more respectful of my choices, but he just gave me some nonsense about giving me space to figure things out. We all know that's just code for being lazy and unhelpful, so he can stay the hero in their eyes while I do all the dirty work of parenting. He is intentionally staying out of the conflict so that I have to be the bad guy who enforces the new rules and introduces the new boyfriend to the household. It's a cowardly, manipulative way to handle a separation, and it just proves that I was right to move on from someone who can't even stand up for his own children's behavior. I am doing all the heavy lifting in this transition, and Mark is just sitting on the sidelines, waiting for me to fail so he can swoop in. Julian has been so patient with the gym situation, even though Leo keeps making accidental noise near the office while Julian is trying to focus on his reps. It's so clear that the kids are trying to mark their territory like little animals, and it's embarrassing that I have to manage this level of immaturity. I told the kids that the office is Julian's space now and that they need to respect his privacy, just like they expect me to respect theirs. But of course, that was interpreted as me taking away their father's memory, which is just such a dramatic and inaccurate way of looking at a room. It's a room with 4 walls and a floor. It's not a sacred shrine to a man who didn't even use it half the time he lived here. I'm starting to think that the kids' behavior is a direct reflection of the negativity they were exposed to during my marriage to Mark, and Julian is just the convenient target. They've been conditioned to think that change is bad and that mother should always be the one who suffers in silence for the sake of the unit. Well, that version of me is dead and buried, and they are just going to have to get used to the new, improved Sarah who isn't afraid to take up space. I'm not going to let a couple of kids who don't even pay the mortgage tell me who I can have in my own home or where I can put a treadmill. It's my life, it's my house, and I am the one who gets to decide what our future looks like. I've been looking into positive reinforcement techniques, but it's hard to reinforce anything when they won't even engage with the gifts or the kindness Julian and I offer. We bought Leo a new workout bench so he could join Julian, but he just stared at it like it was a pile of toxic waste. It's so disheartening when you try to bridge the gap with shared interests and you get slapped in the face with no thanks. They are choosing to be miserable, and at some point, I have to stop letting their choice affect my own vibration. I am a woman who is in love and who is finally free, and I won't let their garage-eating protests take that away from me. If they want to act like strangers, I will treat them like guests who are overstaying their welcome with bad manners until they learn to appreciate what they have. I am provide them with a beautiful home, great food, and a mother who is finally happy and mentally stable. That should be enough for any child, but they are being greedy for a past that wasn't even that great to begin with. I'm going to keep moving Julian's things in and making this house our own, and the kids can either join the party or keep sitting in the garage. I've done my part, I've done the emotional labor, and now it's up to them to grow up and see the reality of the situation. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "Your foundation of happiness, logic is the most selfish, gaslighting thing I've ever heard. Your happiness is literally destroying their entire world and you're mocking them for eating in the garage just to escape the new guy." OP's reply, "A depressed, stagnant mother is objectively worse for a child's development than a mother who is empowered and supported by a new partner who actually respects her. It's basic psychology, whether you want to admit it or not, and I'm doing the work to ensure they have a healthy mother." Anonymous user 2 says, "Is Mark taking them away? It sounds like they are one step away from calling him to come pick them up permanently because they can't stand being near you and Julian." OP's reply, "He's giving me space, which is just his way of being lazy and unhelpful while I manage the heavy lifting of this transition. He's not taking anyone, he's just letting me deal with the fallout of his own failure as a partner while he stays the good guy." Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and the atmosphere in this house was becoming so heavy and stagnant that I decided a grand, celebratory gesture was absolutely necessary to break the tension. I decided to throw a fresh start party and invited my siblings and some of our closest family friends to celebrate this vibrant new chapter of my life. I figured that if the kids saw my entire support system embracing Julian and seeing how genuinely happy he makes me, they'd feel pressured, encouraged to do the same. It was supposed to be a visual and social demonstration that my choice was valid, healthy, and celebrated by the people who truly matter most in our lives. I spent days planning a sophisticated menu and making sure every corner of the house looked perfect, finally replacing all those missing face photos with beautiful new ones of me and Julian. During the party, I even stood up and made a short, heartfelt speech about how love isn't a zero-sum game and how our hearts can always expand to include more people and more joy. I was feeling so inspired and articulate, thinking I was finally getting through to everyone about the beauty and necessity of this transition for my soul. But not only did the kids refuse to even come downstairs to say a simple hello to our guests, but my own sister had the nerve to pull me aside in the kitchen. She told me I was being tone deaf, and that I was forcing a reality on my children that they weren't emotionally ready for, which was such a betrayal. I was absolutely floored by her words. She's always been jealous of my ability to pivot and find happiness, and this was clearly her way of trying to bring me down. To make matters even worse, Julian ended up drinking way too much because he felt so incredibly awkward with the kids hiding upstairs and my sister whispering behind our backs like a middle schooler. He's a very sensitive, empathetic soul, and the negative energy my children were radiating throughout the entire house finally got to his nerves. He was stumbling a bit and being a little too loud with the guests, which only gave the judgmental people more ammunition to look at me with that fake, pitying, "Oh you poor thing" look. I had to spend the rest of the night apologizing for his behavior and making up excuses for why the kids weren't there, which was incredibly draining and unfair. I'm the one who put in all the work to create a beautiful evening, and I ended up being the one cleaning up the literal and emotional mess while everyone acted like I was the criminal. It is honestly mind-blowing how quickly your so-called support system turns on you when you decide to stop living for them and start living for yourself. My sister, who has known me my whole life, chose to side with the poor kids and their drama instead of supporting her own sister's mental health journey and new love. She made the whole night about their grief and their loss, instead of celebrating my rebirth and the fact that I'm finally not a ghost anymore. It's like everyone in my life is committed to keeping me in that miserable, beige version of myself because it made their own lives easier and more predictable. They can't handle a woman who is unapologetic about her own desires and her own happiness, so they label me as tone deaf to make themselves feel morally superior. I'm the only one who seems to see the bigger picture here, while everyone else is bogged down in the petty, small-minded details of the feelings and timing. Julian was just reacting to the hostility in the air. He's not the problem. The toxic atmosphere created by the kids and my sister is the real problem. If my children would just open their hearts for 1 second and stop being so self-absorbed, they would see how much better everything could be for all of us. Instead, they are choosing to stay in their rooms like little hermits, casting a shadow over my entire life and my new relationship. I am being punished for having the courage to change, and it's a lonely, thankless job being the pioneer of your own happiness in a family of traditionalists. The party was supposed to be my coming out as a happy woman, but it turned into a showcase for everyone else's judgment and insecurity. I saw friends whispering in corners, looking at the new photos of Julian and me as if they were looking at a crime scene rather than a celebration of love. It's so clear that people are threatened by someone who refuses to follow the proper timeline for misery after a breakup. I don't need a year of mourning a marriage that was already dead for 5. I found my light, and I'm going to follow it regardless of who tries to dim it. My sister's tone-deaf comment was just a reflection of her own stagnant life and her inability to imagine anything better than a boring, safe existence. Julian apologized the next morning, feeling terrible about getting too drunk, and it made me love him even more to see his vulnerability and his genuine regret. He's so much more of a man than Mark ever was, even at his worst, because he actually cares about how his actions affect my reputation and my peace. He's struggling with the kids' rejection because he wants to be a father figure to them, and they are treating him like he's a villain in a cartoon. I told him he just needs to be patient, that eventually, they will see how great he is and they will come around to the new reality. But deep down, I'm starting to get angry that I have to keep defending him and myself in my own home. I decided to take down all the photos from the party since they only remind me of everyone's judgment, and I put up even bigger ones of Julian and me in the hallway. If they want to be confronted with reality, I will make sure they see it every single time they leave their rooms to go to the bathroom. I am not going to hide my love or my life because it makes other people feel uncomfortable or sad. Their discomfort is their own responsibility to manage, not mine, and I am done being the emotional caretaker for everyone's insecurities. I deserve a house that is filled with joy and light, not whispers and hidden faces. I'm thinking of cutting off my sister for a while, just to show her that I won't tolerate that kind of negativity in my fresh start. If she can't be happy for me, she doesn't deserve to be part of the beautiful life I'm building with Julian. I need to surround myself with high vibration, people who understand the importance of self-love and radical honesty. My children are unfortunately a package deal, but even they need to learn that their mother's love is a privilege, not a right, and that respect goes both ways. I am the queen of this castle, and if they want to live in the dungeon of their own making, they can go right ahead. I spent the rest of the weekend focusing on Julian and our connection, trying to block out the sounds of the kids moving around upstairs like ghosts of the past. We went for a long drive and talked about our future, about moving to a new city where nobody knows about a mark, or the sabbatical. Maybe a fresh start actually means a fresh location where we can be ourselves without the weight of everyone's expectations and judgment. I'm tired of being the only one fighting for a better life in a house full of people who are determined to stay in the dark. I deserve to be surrounded by light, and I will do whatever it takes to get there, even if I have to leave the shadows behind. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, your sister is the only sane person in that house, and probably in your entire life right now. You threw a party to celebrate your new boyfriend in the house where your kids are still mourning their family? That is beyond cruel and deeply tone deaf. OP's reply, she's always been jealous of my ability to pivot and find joy where others see struggle and stagnation. She's choosing to be a victim advocate for the kids because she doesn't have the courage to make bold moves in her own life. Anonymous user 2 says, even Julian looks uncomfortable now, drinking himself into a stupor because he knows this entire situation is a disaster. The emerger is failing, OP, and everyone except you can see that he's not the saint you think he is. OP's reply, he's just incredibly sensitive to the negative energy the kids are radiating, he's an empath, and he's feeling their misplaced anger more than anyone else in the room. It's not a failure, it's just a rough patch during a major transition that requires more strength than most people possess. Update 4. It's been a month since my last update, and I have to say, a perfect transition I worked so tirelessly and selflessly to build has completely collapsed around me in a way that feels like a personal betrayal by the universe. A few days ago, Leo and Mia sat me down. The irony of them calling a meeting was not lost on me and told me with a chilling lack of emotion that they had asked Mark if they could live with him full-time. They didn't ask me for permission, they didn't consult with me about the logistics, they simply presented it as a finished decision, as if I didn't have a say in where my own children live. When I tried to explain that I was their primary caregiver and that we were a team, they looked at me with this chilling detachment that I didn't think children were capable of. They actually had the audacity to tell me that they didn't recognize the person living in this house anymore, as if I'd become some sort of monster just for changing my hair and my partner for the better. I tried to put my foot down and tell them no, that we were going to stay together and work through this as a new, vibrant family unit with Julian in his home gym. But they simply showed me their tablets and phones. They had both blocked my number and all my social media accounts, cutting off my ability to even communicate with them properly. They told me that if I forced them to stay in this house, they would just stop speaking to me entirely, which they've basically already been doing for weeks anyway. I felt like a stranger in my own living room, being lectured by 2 children who have no idea how much I've sacrificed and endured for them over the years. They are choosing their father's boring, stagnant, beige life over the vibrant, evolved future I was offering them, and it's a slap in the face to everything I've tried to achieve for this family. Then, as if things weren't already bad enough, Julian decided to add his own layer of cowardice and betrayal to the situation. He told me that the hostile environment in the house was starting to affect his own mental health and his ability to focus on his fitness, and that he needed a break of his own to clear his head. He said he couldn't be the man I needed while being treated like an intruder and a villain by my children every single day. So, after all the work I did to move his gym equipment in and defend him to my family and my judgmental sister, he just packed his bags and left me here. He's seeking clarity now too, which is just a fancy, borrowed way of saying he's running away the second things got slightly complicated or required real effort. So now I am sitting here in this big, quiet, empty house with nothing but the silence and those photos I mutilated on the mantle staring back at me. Mark came by earlier to pick up the kids' things, and he didn't even have the decency to look at me or acknowledge the pain I was in. He just moved through the rooms like he was at a grocery store, efficient and cold. I tried to tell him he was winning by default, that he was destroying the kids' chance at an evolved life, but he didn't even give me the satisfaction of an argument. He just took the kids and their boxes and left me standing in the driveway like a piece of discarded trash from my own life story. I am the one who stayed, I am the one who tried to build something new, and I am the one who is left with nothing but empty rooms and a sabbatical that has turned into a permanent, lonely exile. I truly tried to give my children and my partner a better, more authentic, and more vibrant version of myself, and I am being punished for it by the very people I was trying to include in my joy. They have made me a stranger in my own family, turning my journey of self-discovery into a reason to abandon and judge me from a distance. It's a classic, tragic case of people being unable to handle a woman who takes her own happiness seriously and refuses to be a ghost. I am the only real victim in this entire scenario, left to pick up the pieces of a life that everyone else was too small-minded, too traditional, and too selfish to share with me. I'm still the same Sarah, just more evolved and more awake, and it's ultimately their massive loss that they can't see the beauty and the light in that. I'll be here, in my house, waiting for the day they realize that I was the only one brave enough to actually live.